Have you ever wondered how a single man can change the course of history? The life of Moses, a man chosen by divinity, offers surprising answers to this question. His story is not just a chronicle of miraculous events. It is a journey of faith, courage, and divine revelation. From his first breath to his decisive steps in history, every moment of Moses' life is imbued with meaning and purpose. Today, we will unveil the hidden secrets in his life, secrets that every believer should know to truly understand the depth of his legacy. The birth and salvation of Moses. In an era marked by fear and oppression, the birth of a child in an Israelite family became a symbol of hope and challenge. In the heart of Egypt, under the rule of a cruel pharaoh, the lives of the Israelites were plagued by suffering and slavery. The pharaoh's edict, fearful of the growing Israelite population, condemned to death all Hebrew newborn males. But in this bleak landscape, the faith and love of a mother forged an unimaginable destiny for her son. Yocheved, Moses' mother, with her heart torn by fear, but guided by deep faith, devised a plan to save her son. With trembling hands, she built a small basket, waterproofed it with pitch, and placed it in the waters of the Nile River. Little Moses, unaware of the dangers surrounding him, slept peacefully in his makeshift floating cradle. Yocheved entrusted her son's life to fate, praying that the waters of the Nile would carry him to safety. The basket, guided by an invisible hand, reached the shores where the pharaoh's daughter was bathing. Moved by curiosity and compassion, the princess ordered the basket to be brought to her. Upon discovering the child, her heart filled with pity, and she decided to save him. Although she knew he was an Israelite baby, her desire to protect him outweighed her father's edict. Moses, unaware, had been embraced in the heart and home of those who had sworn his destruction. In a twist of fate, Moses' sister Miriam, who had followed the basket from a distance, offered to find an Israelite nursemaid for the baby. Thus, miraculously, Yocheved was called to care for her own son, under the protection of the pharaoh's palace. Moses grew up amidst the opulence and learning of the Egyptian court, but always with the tacit knowledge of his true origin. This part of his life lays the groundwork for understanding the duality that Moses would carry with him: the upbringing within his oppressor and the undeniable connection to his native people. This miraculous beginning was just the start of a journey that would define a leader, a prophet, and a liberator. The encounter with the burning bush. The sun rose over the Sinai desert, bathing the sand in its golden light. Moses, now a man far from the luxuries of the Egyptian palace, was shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro. In this humble and quiet life, Moses had found refuge from the past, but destiny had greater plans for him. While following a wayward sheep, Moses came across an astonishing sight: a bush burning with fire, yet not consumed. Curiosity and wonder led him to approach. It was then that the voice of God resonated from the bush, calling him by name. This divine encounter marked a turning point in Moses' life and in the history of the Israelite people. God revealed himself to Moses not only as the creator of the universe, but as the protector and liberator of his oppressed people. He entrusted Moses with the monumental task of freeing the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of this mission and his own insecurities, Moses doubted his ability to carry it out. However, God assured him of his presence and power, providing miraculous signs to prove his authenticity to the people and the Pharaoh. This moment is essential for understanding Moses' character. Although he had grown up in the Pharaoh's palace, his Hebrew roots and his encounter with the divine transformed him into a spiritual leader and liberator of his people. The fire of the burning bush became the symbol of his calling, a flame that would not consume Moses but strengthen and guide him. With the bush as witness, Moses accepted his destiny. He prepared to confront the Pharaoh and liberate his people, armed with faith in God and miraculous signs. This chapter in Moses' life reveals how, even in the solitude of the desert, a man can come face to face with his destiny and respond to the call of history. The plagues of Egypt. In his return to Egypt, Moses, armed with the divine mission to free his people, confronted the Pharaoh. With a heart hardened by pride and power, the Pharaoh rejected Moses' pleas for the freedom of the Israelites. It was the beginning of a series of catastrophic events that would shake the foundations of Egypt. The first plague fell upon the Nile, the river that was Egypt's life source. The waters turned to blood, a crimson liquid flowing through the river's course, killing the fish and leaving an unbearable stench. This transformation was not just an ecological calamity. It was a direct challenge to the deity of the Nile River and a display of God's power. The impact was devastating. Water, essential for life, became a source of death and desolation. But the heart of the Pharaoh remained unchanged, and a second plague followed. Frogs, usually harmless creatures, became an invasive tide. They emerged from the contaminated river, invading homes, fields, and temples. Their presence was unavoidable, a constant disturbance challenging the Egyptian deity Hecate, associated with frogs. This plague, besides being a nuisance, was a mockery of the Egyptian religion, demonstrating the supremacy of the God of Israel. The third plague brought an even more humiliating punishment. The dust of Egypt turned into lice, an infestation affecting both Egyptians and their animals. This plague was an affront to hygiene and dignity, showing that even the smallest and most despicable could become an instrument of divine punishment. With the fourth plague, swarms of corrupting flies filled the air of Egypt. This time, the punishment was selective, affecting only the Egyptians and leaving the Israelites unharmed. This distinction was a clear message. God protected his people. The overwhelming presence of the flies was a constant reminder of the Pharaoh's rebellion and of divine protection over the oppressed. The fifth plague attacked Egypt's economic livelihood, its livestock. A lethal disease struck the animals, killing them en masse. This plague was not only a blow to the economy, but also a challenge to the Egyptian deities associated with animals. The Egyptian landscape, once teeming with life, was turning into a scene of death and despair. With the sixth plague, affliction became personal. Painful boils afflicted the Egyptians, a physical punishment that could not be ignored or explained. This plague was a visible mark of divine judgment, a wound reminding every Egyptian of their challenge to a higher power. Hail, mixed with fire, marked the seventh plague. This destructive storm devastated crops and fields, a devastating blow to a nation already staggering. This plague was a direct attack on the sky god and a demonstration that no aspect of the natural world was beyond God's reach. The eighth plague brought swarms of locusts. These devouring insects consumed what was left of Egyptian vegetation, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. This plague not only represented an immediate threat to Egypt's survival, but also a harbinger of famine and desolation. Darkness covered Egypt in the ninth plague. For 3 days, a supernatural darkness shrouded the land, a direct challenge to the sun god Ra. This plague was a powerful symbolic message. Even the sunlight, the source of life and energy, was subject to God's power. Finally, the 10th and most devastating plague struck the heart of Egypt, the death of all firstborns. This tragedy reached from the humblest homes to the Pharaoh's palace, including his own son. This plague was a final act of divine judgment, an unequivocal message of God's supreme power and the inevitability of his will. Each plague, each sign of divine power, was a call to repentance and the liberation of the Israelite people. However, the Pharaoh, in his pride and stubbornness, refused to yield until it was too late. The plagues of Egypt are not just tales of punishment and divine power, but also stories of resistance, faith, and the struggle for freedom. The division of the Red Sea. After the last devastating plague, the Pharaoh finally relented and allowed the Israelites to depart. Moses, leading his people, embarked on a journey toward freedom. However, this freedom was about to be challenged. The Pharaoh, repentant of his decision and enraged, mobilized his army and pursued the Israelites until reaching them near the Red Sea. With the sea in front of them and the Egyptian army closing in, The Israelites found themselves trapped and engulfed in panic. In this moment of desperation, Moses' faith in God remained unshakable. With the confidence that God would not abandon them, he raised his staff over the sea. What followed was an act of unparalleled divine power. The waters of the Red Sea parted, creating a path in the midst of the sea. The Israelites crossed the seabed on dry land, surrounded by walls of water on both sides. This feat not only represented a physical escape from slavery, but also a symbolic act of transitioning from despair to hope, from oppression to freedom. Once the last of the Israelites reached the other shore, the Egyptian army, in their obstinate pursuit, entered the open sea path. It was then that, with another divine gesture, the waters crashed down upon them, burying the army beneath the sea. This miracle not only ensured the liberation of the Israelites, but also served as a definitive demonstration of God's power and protection over his chosen people. The division of the Red Sea is one of the most emblematic and powerful stories in Moses' life. This event not only highlights his role as a leader chosen by God, but also represents a critical moment of transition for the Israelites, marking their final liberation from slavery and the beginning of their journey to the Promised Land. The reception of the commandments at Mount Sinai, after the miraculous escape and the liberation from Egyptian bondage, Moses led the Israelites to the desert of Sinai. Here, in a place marked by the austerity and solitude of the desert, Moses would ascend Mount Sinai to meet with God again. This encounter would change not only his life, but that of his entire people. On Mount Sinai, surrounded by the majesty and power of nature, Moses received from God the tablets of the law, the 10 Commandments. These laws were not mere regulations. They were the foundation of a new covenant between God and his people, a set of principles that would guide the life and morality of the Israelites. The commandments spanned from exclusive worship of God to rules about communal living. These laws emphasized justice, mercy, and reverence, forming a moral and spiritual code that would endure through generations. While Moses remained on Mount Sinai, the people waited below, anxious and fearful. The delivery of the commandments was not only an act of divine revelation, but also a moment of consolidation of Moses' leadership. In these commandments, the Israelites found not only a path to moral rectitude, but also confirmation of their special relationship with God. However, Moses' stay on the mountain extended, and the absence of his visible leadership caused unrest among the people. This waiting period tested their faith and patience, triggering an event that would jeopardize the newly established covenant. The incident of the golden calf. While Moses was on Mount Sinai, the faith of the Israelites was tested. The prolonged absence of their leader, coupled with the uncertainty and fear of being alone in the desert, led the people to question their faith and divert their worship toward tangible idols. In an act of desperation and confusion, they turned their jewelry into a golden calf, falling into idolatry that the recently delivered commandments had explicitly forbidden. This act represented more than simple disobedience. It was a breach of the covenant with God, a denial of his guidance and protection. The golden calf, a symbol of power and fertility in many ancient cultures, became the object of worship for a fearful and lost people. Upon descending from the mountain, Moses encountered this scene of idolatry and betrayal. Anger and disappointment overwhelmed him as he saw how his people had so quickly abandoned the precepts that had been given to them. The tablets of the commandments, a symbol of the sacred covenant between God and his people, were shattered in a symbolic act of breaking this agreement. This incident was a critical point in the relationship between Moses, his people, and God. Moses interceded with God for his people, seeking mercy and forgiveness. This act of mediation reveals an essential aspect of Moses. Despite his anger and disappointment, his love and commitment to his people remained unshaken. God's response was both punitive and merciful. Although there were severe consequences for those who led the idolatry, there was also forgiveness for the repentant people. This incident served as a harsh lesson on faithfulness, temptation, and the need to firmly adhere to faith in God. The incident of the golden calf was more than a mere stumble on the Israelites' journey. It was a fundamental test of their faith and a lesson on the importance of unwavering devotion. Through this challenge, both Moses and his people learned about the gravity of their commitments and the depth of divine mercy. The encounter with Al-Khidr. In his journey as a leader and prophet, Moses embarked on a voyage that would lead him to an unforgettable lesson about wisdom and divine providence. This journey led him to encounter Al-Khidr, a mysterious and wise servant of God, known for his deep connection to hidden knowledge and the designs of the Almighty. Moses, always eager for knowledge and guided by his fervent desire to learn, joined Al-Khidr on his journey. However, what Moses would experience during their companionship would be a series of bewildering events and tests to his patience and understanding. The first event occurred on a boat. Al-Khidr, without apparent explanation, damaged the vessel that had provided them passage. Moses, confused and concerned by the action, questioned Al-Khidr. How could someone serving God cause seemingly unjustified harm? However, Al-Khidr reminded Moses to have patience and not to judge hastily. The second event was even more perplexing. Al-Khidr took the life of a young man. This act left Moses deeply troubled, struggling to reconcile the action with his understanding of justice and mercy. Despite the promise of patience, Moses could not contain his bewilderment and questioned Al-Khidr once again. The third event led them to a village where Al-Khidr repaired a crumbling wall, asking for nothing in return. Moses, perplexed by this selfless and seemingly motiveless action, expressed his confusion. It was the third time Moses had questioned Al-Khidr, and with this, their time together came to an end. Al-Khidr then revealed the purpose behind his actions. The boat had been damaged to protect it from a tyrant king who seized seaworthy vessels. The death of the young man, though tragic, prevented a future of cruelty and pain for his parents, who would be blessed with a better and more pious son. The repair of the wall was an act of kindness towards two orphans in the village, safeguarding a treasure that their pious father had left for them. Each of these actions, which at first glance seemed inexplicable or even unjust, had a deeper purpose in the divine plan. This encounter was a crucial lesson for Moses. Divine wisdom and knowledge are beyond immediate human understanding. Al-Khidr's teachings underscored the importance of patience, faith in God's wisdom, and humility in the face of mysteries that escape our understanding. This chapter in Moses' life highlights a fundamental aspect of spiritual seeking: the acceptance that not everything can be comprehended by the human mind, and the importance of trusting in divine wisdom and goodness, even when God's ways seem mysterious and inscrutable. Moses' life, marked by miracles, challenges, and profound teachings, stands as a symbol of faith and determination. From his rescue in the Nile to the liberation of his people and the encounter with Al-Khidr, each episode of his life teaches us about trust in the divine and the importance of patience and understanding. Moses is not just a leader and prophet. He is an example of resilience in the face of adversity and unwavering commitment to truth and justice. His legacy endures as a source of inspiration, reminding us of the strength of faith and the depth of divine wisdom.